Dylan, welcome to the JumpSearch Talent Show. I'm really excited to have you here. I'm really excited to dig in with your, with respect to your experience in terms of this transition with AI. Just based on what I've seen, you're doing some really amazing things. And I'd love to sort of learn more about what you're doing, how you transitioned, and really the whole story. And hopefully our audience and myself can walk away with some things that we can start to incorporate into our own day to day. So, for our listeners, as a brief intro, Dylan Davis is the founder of Gradient Labs. He runs an AI consultancy that helps mid-sized teams save time, cut costs, and boost revenue through practical automation. With past roles at MasterCard and Recorded Future, Dylan has led impactful AI initiatives from reducing proposal creation time by 90% to slashing manual work by 95%. His surprisingly simple approach strips away the tech jargon and focuses on tools that deliver results. And Dylan is known for his clear, no fluff AI insights shared on YouTube, LinkedIn, and his Beehive newsletter. Now he builds custom scrapers, automations, AI powered products that scale from client discovery calls to repeatable revenue. And another thing that I guess I should sort of expand on here too, Dylan, is that I've noticed that you've made this transition in terms of working with larger organizations to my understanding, working largely solo. And that's quite a transition. Anyway, I think a lot to unpack here. I'm really excited. Welcome to our show. And if there's anything you want to add to sort of your background or your intro, I'm happy to hear it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. First off, usually the way I kind of explain the company is I help other companies, usually small to medium size, automate stuff internally. So saving time, money, generating revenue. And actually, no longer a Beehive newsletter guy. I've converted to ConvertKit.
Oh, okay, ConvertKit,
I
and we'll make sure we
transitioned.
get those links, and we'll put those in the show notes
Of course,
along with
yeah,
your
yeah.
LinkedIn profile, website, and all that. What was the sort of
Why did I
motivation there?
transition?
Yeah.
The motivation. Sequencing. So I've realized that Beehive has some sequencing abilities, but ConvertKit actually has pretty strong sequencing. So I'm basically, we might talk about this, but I'm trying different things out when it comes to generating leads and nurturing potential prospects into clients. One of which is having like a 30-day AI insights series. So I basically created a 30-day drip feed where it gives you insights on how to utilize AI for 30 days straight. And that's one method I've learned from other kind of gurus in the space of lead gen is a good way to move someone down a funnel from just a prospect to a potential lead or a potential client.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, we'll have to
Yeah.
learn more about that because we use Beehive as well. So we still use Beehive. So I guess I wanted to start off with just kind of understanding maybe that transition
Mhm.
between working for larger organizations and perhaps what you've learned there and sort of the motivation and just sort of the sequence of events that prompted you to sort of transition into running Gradient Labs.
Yeah. So it was 10 years in the making. So it wasn't, it took a while. So I was in the corporations for 10 years working for large organizations. And I've always wanted to pursue the entrepreneurial life, but I never had the courage to do so. And just probably 6 months ago, I finally did. And how I made that transition, it's interesting. My friends and I, we talk about the fact that often action doesn't happen from inspiration, but desperation. And when I talk about action, it's radical action. And there was a moment of desperation, realizing that like I no longer wanted to be in a corporation. I no longer wanted to have to agree to certain things that I disagreed with just because it was either my boss or my boss's 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 boss. And in those cases, like it's that was one, right? So it's desperation, inspiration. Another one is I've consistently always consumed information from founders, and all of my friends are founders. So most of my really close friends, I have a group of 5 guys that I've been friends with for probably 8 years now. Every single one of them, I'm the black sheep of the group. I was the only person that was an employee. And every time I met with them, we would meet weekly on Sundays. So we would meet Sunday morning. It was like our version of church. And we talked for like 3 hours. And I was always kind of like the black sheep of the group where they would kind of poke fun and like ask questions and things like that. But they were always the founders. And I was like, like that was another thing, right? So like social. And then the consumption piece of like consuming information from others that were founders, I always found myself admiring founders. And those were the people I truly admired. I was like, man, like I really both like what they've done, but also I like the freedom they have. And then also reading some books and things like that. There was one thing that really stuck with me is Nassim Taleb wrote a book called Skin in the Game. And there's a chapter inside of that book where he talks about the difference between an employee and a founder, an entrepreneur. And he compared them to domesticated dogs and wolves, where oftentimes when you have a domesticated dog, they survive, but they survive within a certain environment that's been constructed for them to survive in. But a wolf, they can survive in the wild. So if you get dropped into the wild as a dog, you're likely not going to survive. And that was one thing that really resonated with me. And I read that like 6 years ago. So it took 6 years for me to actually be like, oh, like maybe I should actually try to do this thing. And making the transition, it's obviously scary. There's a lot of ups and downs, all those things. But for me, like net, it was totally worth it.
So I would imagine working at these larger companies for a huge portion of your career you were domesticated.
Yeah.
How did you sort of become that? How did you transition from being that domesticated dog, if you will, to that wolf, right? And it's and how did you transition to that? What were some of the
Well,
learnings there?
I would say I'm probably still a domesticated dog in the wild trying to survive. I think that's a good analogy, a good quote right now. So it was all those things that took time, right? So it wasn't immediate, but it was all the things I mentioned previously that kind of piled up over years and years. And I guess the breaking point was just honestly I couldn't tell you what the breaking point was. It was just realizing that like this was not actually no, that's not true. There was a thing that I repeated to myself that I realized that it's I think it was like I'd rather fail being an entrepreneur than succeed being an employee. And that was something that I repeated to myself. And I realized that I only would fail if I quit. So if I truly accepted this path and said I will no longer be an employee forever, this has to work. I burned all the bridges, all the boats, not literally, but theoretically or
Yeah.
metaphorically. And like if that's true, then I have to make this work. And if it's not this company, it's the next. If it's not the next, it's the next. So it's like maybe I go through 8 companies, 8 variations, but eventually one will succeed. And throughout the process of building all of these companies, I'll learn how to build them faster. And the way I think about it is a video game. Any skill, when you start entrepreneurship, there's a series of things you have to get good at. You have to get good at building stuff with your hands technically. You have to get good at selling stuff. You have to get good at generating leads. You have to get good at hiring and training. And each one of these are just bosses inside of a video game where it's like you beat the one boss in the video game level, and then you go to the next boss. And you beat the boss, and you go to the next one. And once you beat one boss and you start over again with a new company, you know how to beat that boss. So when you get to that level, you get through it faster. So if I've gone from level 1 to 3, the company fails, I can get from 1 to 3 a lot faster than I did the first company because I know how to. So I think like it's all those things helped me realize that it's both like, I don't fail if I don't quit. And also I'd rather fail this way than win the other way.
You mentioned desperation earlier. I think there's a lot of folks right now that are uh, either unemployed or underemployed. And if they haven't already, they reach that sort of sense of desperation. And I think a lot of them are, considering that maybe I need to take matters in my own hands and pursue that path of entrepreneurship as opposed to finding an employer, so to speak. And so, you're still in this transition, but maybe you're 7 months out or 8 months out. What are some of those key learnings or like what advice would you give to that person that is maybe doing a half-hearted job search and maybe they've sort of given up on the job search and are kind of trying to figure out what to do next, and maybe they're considering pursuing a path in entrepreneurship?
I would say figure out what you want first. So like if you generally want to do the entrepreneurship thing, I think that would be more clear. But if it's a vague amorphous kind of like, oh, that would be interesting, I would probably just get better at trying to find jobs, because that in itself is a boss, right? So it's like that is one of the bosses to the levels of achieving either employment and or like kind of going through the corporate ladder. It's like figuring out like, how do I get my name out there? How do I apply to more jobs effectively? How do I go through the third door instead of the front door? So oftentimes with me, when I worked in corporations, I think the last 6 jobs I had, I did an interview for. And it's because I had a connection through somebody I knew from a thing. So I would always take the third door instead of the first door. And when I say third door, it's basically like you have the entrance. And in the entrance, that's where you apply. So you go to the job application, you apply for the job. That's the front door. The back door is oftentimes like maybe somebody that works at the company, and it's like maybe your dad's company and he like brings you in the back door. And then there's the third door where it's like I have a friend of a friend, or I've met this person. So oftentimes when I was looking for jobs, I would probably start 6 months prior, and I would have probably 6 to 7 calls a week, all the way up until I decided to leave. And those calls were usually kind of informal interviews, kind of like this, where I say, "Hey, tell me about your story. Tell me about how you got into this position. What do you hate about it? What do you love about it?" And just have those informal conversations around just like being friends. Like I'm trying to be friendly, trying to learn about like there's no ask. I never ask anything at the end. It's just like, "Hey, like thanks for the information." And then from that, you build good rapport. They have positive vibes when they're with you and they talk to you, because they're mainly talking about themselves. And usually when people talk about themselves, they usually feel better about themselves at the end of the conversation. So I think it's thinking about the approach differently.
Yeah.
If you wanted to be an employee, you want to be an entrepreneur, then advice on that. I guess if you're afraid, if there's some sort of fear, which was my issue, is vague fears are scary. Specific fears are overcomable in a sense. So don't allow the fear to be vague. If it is vague, break it down. Like, what are you scared of? And then answer the question. And then it'll say, like, why are you scared of that? Answer that question. And then keep going down further and further and further. It's a fear exercise from Tim Ferriss, where basically you play out that fear to the nth degree. And for me, it's like My parents think, I'm a waste because I did all this success and I achieved all these things and I worked my way up the corporate ladder and I threw it all away. So like, oh, you failed. And then like all of the status that I built through that process of people like admiring me and all that stuff, like you lose that. Another one is like maybe you go financially bankrupt, like maybe you lose all your money in this thing, and it's like, okay, like you move back into your bedroom at your mom's or your dad's, like you go to the basement and you live there for a couple of years and you start over. So it's like playing those out to the end degree, like what does it actually look like, the day-to-day life of that life? And it's like it's really not that bad. Like sure, like it sucks a little bit, but it's not the end of the world. Like I'm not going to starve. So I think it's like playing that out makes the fear less scary.
Yeah. And I think that's common for a lot of folks out there, myself included, right? Just having, I love that exercise. And I'm going to look that up with Tim Ferriss and see if he can provide a little bit more guidance there. But turning that sort of vague, dark, the thing with darkness, right? When you're a kid, it's dark in a room, and that's gonna be really scary. But when the lights come on, you kind of have a better sense of what's there, and you might be afraid of this or that, but at least it's something that you can put your arms around, and you can kind of have a better sense of what's what. So for you, it was getting over that fear of um, maybe how others might perceive you. But it sounds like you had or have a good tribe of folks that you saw as maybe mentors, peers, but maybe a source of inspiration. Can you talk a little bit about, it's just the value of creating that kind of sort of peer group, and how it's really influenced and you either inspirationally or just even practically?
I think it's critical. Honestly, I think it's like probably if I had to guess, like the weighting as to which converted me over. If I had to weight the different variables I mentioned, that's probably like 50%, maybe
Yeah.
55%. And it's important to note for those that are listening that when you say social circle, it doesn't have to be somebody you know. So oftentimes when they think about social circles, like the average, like yeah, like you're the average of the five people you spend time with, that old kind of thing
Yeah.
that people say. Well, maybe you don't have those people to be around. Like maybe you're in a small town and you're only surrounded by people that aren't maybe as ambitious as you for a certain area or whatever it is. And if that's the case, you can't just be like, oh, that sucks. Like I guess I'm stuck here. Like no, that's a cop out. The answer is that you need to find indirect inspiration. So maybe you listen to podcasts of people you admire. Maybe you read books of people that you admire. Maybe you go on Discords and Slacks and Twitter and you become friends with people virtually. Like you find the avenue to find the indirect relationship and you try to spend as much time as you can with that person throughout your day to get that inspiration, to sustain the motivation and or desperation, depending on what you're doing. Like yeah, so I think don't allow the fact that you might not have those people directly around you to act as if that's a reason you can't have it.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about the timing. Sort of generative AI emerged on the scene 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago. And how much of that emerging technology was an influence for you to sort of make that transition into leaving sort of the corporate world?
It was a big one. It was the most practical transition I can make at that point in time, and that's why I decided to pursue that path. Because at the previous company I was at before I left, I had a team of 20 people that I managed, and our sole purpose was to automate stuff inside the company right as ChatGPT was released. So ChatGPT was released, and then for about 2 years, I worked with that team automating different things with both that model and other models that were open source and closed source. And as the models improved, it got easier. And also, as we automated more, we started advising other companies who were working with this company. And I realized through that process, I was like, I probably could do this myself, right? Like I don't need to work at this company to do this process. And for me, that was the rational side of my head saying, like if you were to jump, this would be the closest thing to jump to when you leave because you have the experience, you have the credibility, you have the connections and things like that. So that was the rational side of my brain saying like, I should pursue this path because I had experience in doing it.
So you were managing at the time. No, this was at Recorded Future, where you
Right.
were managing 20 people. And what was your role there?
Yeah, it was strategic intelligence. So it was basically a team of both practitioners and researchers. So
Yeah.
people probably back up. In threat intelligence and cybersecurity, there's a certain sector inside of cybersecurity that basically tracks bad guys on the dark web, and they see what are these bad guys doing, both with malware and social engineering and selling drugs and all that stuff, and they track them. And when they track them, they use that tracking to both protect organizations and also to attribute who did the thing, so they can then lock them up. We would do that both for cyber criminals and nation states. So there was a part of the team that would do research on those actors and then write reports both for the companies that worked with us and also government entities. There was another part that was practitioners for AI developing things to automate stuff. So they would automate their research. They would then automate other aspects of other teams. So it's basically a research team and a developer team.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm just curious because I'm wondering, now that you were working with a large team, because it sounds like you're overseeing a lot of their work, and now you're working largely with on your own. Is that fair?
Yeah, yeah, by myself.
And so how have you made that transition from being a leader or manager of humans, teams, to sort of running your own show? How is that? How have you made that transition, and what role does AI play in that? There's an emergence of like agents and things like that. Talk to me a little bit about the transition you've made.
Yeah, so it's I think the only thing, and the people I worked with were amazing. I love them. I'm still friends with a lot of them. But I
Yeah.
think the only thing that I miss is like the social aspect of like having people to chat with and like hang out with, and I can get that with other founders, right? So those 5 guys that I meet with now, we meet with each other more frequently. So we meet with each other maybe 2 to 3 times a week, and we both socialize and like talk about things that we're like either like wins we're having or fails that we're having that we need to try to like flesh out together. So I think if you did pursue this solopreneur situation, it's important to have somebody around to talk to and socialize with about the things you're working on or just in general. So I think that was one thing that I missed from that, from the transition, but also to the managing point is like the whole managing agents thing. I'm starting to get glimmers of what that would look like with a thing called Claude Code. So it's basically just a way to develop code. And this is probably one of the more autonomous ways to write code, where you can have multiple instances of this agent writing code for different aspects of applications I'm building. So I'm managing them as kind of like a project manager or a product manager of saying, build this, build that, make this diversion, do this. So it's a form of management, but you're just managing different variants of AI as they build out certain aspects of a thing that you're working on.
So are these agents that you've built that are acting on your behalf?
So this Cloud Code is something provided by Anthropic, which is the biggest competitor to OpenAI.
Yeah.
And so it's basically something they provide.
Okay. Okay. And so it sounds like
Yeah.
you're basically running a team of agents or tools that Claude has provided now, whereas before you had a team of people that were actually doing a lot of the implementation or execution.
Right.
And now you're sort of a one-person team that is relying on, some of these technologies to execute and implement.
Exactly.
Yeah. Amazing. Do you think this is the future? Do you think what you're doing right now is sort of a model for the way teams will evolve to in the near term here, or even in the longer
Yeah.
term?
Yeah. Honestly, I think it's like it's going to sound. I don't know if it's going to sound optimistic or dark, but I think it's inevitable. And reason being is that if you watch the advancements of the technology, but also you see where that technology sits within a wider ecosystem of capitalism. We live in a world of capitalism, right? And in capitalism, the name of the game is to make as much money as possible and spend as little as money as possible. So if you have a technology that does both of that, then people are going to adopt it and use it as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And it I don't think it's far off or a radical prediction to say that maybe within 2 to 3 years, we'll see teams of 10 people that are making 100 million or more in their organization without tons and tons of headcount. And they've done that through automation. And there probably will be a point, I don't know how long it'll take, but maybe we'll have a one-person team that's made $1 billion. And that seems outrageous and crazy, but I think like that future is not too far off. I mean, like if 5 years, I don't know, but that's probably wrong. But yeah, I think it is the future we will roll into. And I think that's something that everybody should just accept and figure out what that means for them personally. So does that mean that I adopt these AI tools and I automate as much as because that's something I did for my team. I was like, we need to automate ourselves as much as possible because it will eventually happen. And if we can do it for ourselves, that means we can do it for other people inside the company. That means that we're seen as the leaders in AI, which means that we're going to be the most valuable for the next, at least 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you allocate your time right now? Like, how are you deciding what to invest your time in? Like, are you taking sort of a portfolio approach? Are you working on sort of educating clients? Are you building products? Is it some combination of all of the above?
Yeah.
What's your approach?
So it's the biggest boss, like basically fighting the next biggest boss. So right now, the biggest boss is lead gen. So not all of my time, but a good proportion of my time, especially when my attention is at its peak. So in my day, my attention goes and sways like anybody else. And usually in the morning between probably 6 a.m. to around 12 p.m., that time frame is when I'm most switched on mentally. And that's where a lot of my time goes for lead generation activities. So that could be content creation, that could be cold outreach, that could be writing newsletters, that could be talking to clients, that could be doing like prospects, not clients. And then like basically everything front loaded for lead gen. And then after I've done that and my brain starts to kind of like sag off a bit, then I'll start doing things that are more operational in nature. So it's like, all right, well, maybe I need to respond to a bunch of emails related to clients I'm working with currently, or there's some materials I need to create for a client that I have coming up, like a deadline for whatever time. And at the tail end of that, then I'll have phone calls. So like right now it's 3:44. So I have phone calls with you, I have phone calls with other clients, I have phone calls with other people. So at the tail end of the day, I'll have a lot of social interactions, because that's when I can still have a meaningful conversation. I can still have a lot of progress in the things that matter. So I break it up based off of the biggest boss, and the biggest boss right now is lead gen. So that goes first.
Biggest boss being your next biggest challenge, in other words, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. As far, I mean, it sounds like you have a pretty methodical approach or playbook to how you allocate and spend your time, and you're distributing time across each day, across each week, um, with sort of a balanced big boss, operational, and then sort of this, I don't know what you call it, the social component, or sort of connecting with folks. It's part business development, part networking. Is that fair? Yeah.
It's usually client comms.
Live communications. Okay. And your clients right now, are you typically like, what are they looking for when when first a client engages you? Like, do they have a known problem, or are they just looking for sort of general education, AI intro workshops kind of thing? Like, what has sort of that on-ramp pattern look like for you?
Yeah. So for me right now, it's interesting. It probably plans out for different people depending on the business model they have. But since I have a consultancy, basically the name of the game is getting as many clients as possible, and how that manifests is like, it's like, if it works, it works. Like I'm pretty open to a lot of things, depending on if I can deliver it, right? So right now, a lot of the stuff is custom projects. So somebody will come to me and say, "Hey, I'm looking for some insight on how I can utilize AI internally at my company." And in those conversations, we focus on bottlenecks. So we have a very similar conversation you're having with me right now, where it's like, okay, like what's your goal? What do you want to achieve? And they have to name something specific. They can't just say like, "Oh, I want to grow revenue." It's like, okay, like to what, when, and then to get to that number, what's the bottleneck from where you are today to get to that number? So say somebody comes to me, "Hey, we want to get to 100 million. Right now we're at 50. We want to get to 100 million per year, and then we want to get to that in 18 months." Let's go, okay, that's the goal. Well, if that's the goal, what's the bottleneck to get to that goal? Is it more leads? Is it sales calls? Is it delivering the existing clients you have? Like, what is the issue? And they then talk about that. And it's like, okay, like in that category, what are the specific tasks associated to achieving that thing? So if it's, for instance, maybe it's like, I don't know, delivering a certain type of product to a customer or a service to a customer. So, okay, like for providing that service, what are the steps involved? It's like they break those down. It's like, okay, and then let's break that down even further. And it's basically like an investigation or interrogation of understanding all of
Yeah.
the processes associated to achieving that goal. And then from that, we can say, okay, here's the 10 things you've mentioned. Of these, 8 of them can be automated with AI. The other 2, not so much, at least not yet. So of these 8, which is the top priority? And it's like, okay, of these 8, I think this is the biggest one that's the most important to actually get us to that thing. It's okay, let's start there. And then we'll work on that project, finish that, and go to the next one. Work on that project, finish that, and go to the next one. And usually what happens with this is if some people ask me for projects that can be productized. So what I've just walked you through is the service component, where I provide a service and I build an automation. But then oftentimes they ask for something that many other people will benefit from that same thing. So
Yeah.
I built the thing for a bunch of recruiting agents. And these recruiting agents said, "Hey, like, we need help with this." And I was like, "All right, cool. Like, I bet other people like you have the same issue." So I then productize that service, and then I resell it 25 times to a bunch of other
Got it.
recruiting agents that have the same issue. So it's a both a service and a product kind of approach to the business model.
So in terms of lead generation, are you biasing towards new clients, or are you trying to do lead generation for sort of your productized solutions? And how do you think through that?
Both right now. So when I have a product that I can sell, which the recruiting agent tool is,
Yeah.
I'll then do mass cold outreach. So I send probably like, I don't know, 500 emails a week. And then from those, I'll have a bunch of calls with prospects and then try to sell those products to them. And then for the inbound stuff, I have both referrals of people I've worked with in the past that kind of sends people my way, and or content. So I have YouTube and LinkedIn where people find me there, and they'll then book one of the offerings that I have, because I have 3-tiered offerings, kind of low, mid, high.
Okay. Got it. And talk a little bit about, I guess, some of the learnings that you've had over the past 6 to 8 months in terms of, now that you're sort of leveling up each stage. Like, what are some of the learnings that you've experienced? And in terms of, I mean, there's sort of marketing, there's a technical piece. It's a shifting landscape in terms of the capabilities of the technology. I guess, what are some of the learnings, and maybe there's some of the pitfalls that you've been able to either sidestep or sort of work your way out of, that somebody that's following 6 months behind you should know about?
I mean, I think the big one, if you're like me and you're coming from a corporate career to an entrepreneur career, it's the biggest pitfall. I don't even know if it's a pitfall, but it's just like the acceptance of what it is the lack of a consistent paycheck. So when you're an employee, you know every 2 weeks or every month you're going to have money coming into your account. So you can then pay your bills, you can pay your rent, you can do all those things. And you're like, haha, I'm good. But with entrepreneurship, it ebbs and flows depending on the type of business. So since I have a consultancy right now and it's mainly service based and project based, it comes and goes, but the waves are a lot bigger, right? So it's like you have a big spike and that'll last you 4 6 months. And then you have another big spike and that'll last you another couple of months. But
Yeah.
the frequency of when those spikes occur are like sporadic. You have no idea. So that's something that I'm trying to solve currently. That's a pitfall I've fallen into. So I'm trying to figure out like a lead gen system that can have more consistent inflow. But the psychology to that is probably one of the biggest things you have to get over, of realizing that like you won't always have money coming in. So you need to know how to both accept that fact and also spread out your funds to ensure that you can cover those winters until a new summer arrives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about so in terms of like consultancy versus productization, are you sort of 50-50 in terms of your effort and your time? And what are you like how do you imagine your team, your organization scaling? Is it more on the I would imagine it's more on the productized side as you develop
Mm.
solutions that can scale and you can get more exposure and more
Right.
business from
So
them.
yeah, so it's leverage. Leverage is the key, and figuring out like what's the highest leverage thing I can do, and productizes that. So if I one of my goals is to get to 1 million a year by myself without hiring anybody, and then after that, then I can hire people. And the reason I want to do that is it shows you've eaten your own dog food. In the sense, like when I talk to people about automating their business, if I can say, I've scaled my business to X without hiring anybody through automations, it shows that it's possible. So that's one point, and that means that the productization is probably going to be the area I focus most. But to get to that, I have to do services because I'm not much of an ideas guy. I don't come up with like really cool product ideas out of nowhere, but I do come up with ideas based off of problems that people are actually having. So if I've
Yeah.
built something for somebody else and they're already paying me for it, I know there's a high chance that other people will pay for this exact thing they've already paid for. So instead of me coming up with some cool snazzy app that like takes notes or like helps you meditate, I'm gonna repurpose this thing that's very business oriented and super niche and then sell it to other people just like this person because I know it solves a real problem.
I mean, it's already validated because they're paying you for it.
Exactly.
It's a demonstrated need that somebody would pay for to have solved.
So that's kind of the approach is like, you have your service and then you start doing products and then over time it switches, right? Because right now it's
Yeah.
like more service and less product, but eventually hopefully it goes like this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then as far as hiring folks, it sounds like to eat your own dog food, you get to $1 million a year in revenue by yourself. At what point would you hire folks versus? I mean, what would be the motivation at that point to hire folks?
It's going to sound silly, but like social, like I just want to have cool people to hang out with and
Yeah,
have somebody to rant with, but also there's probably things that I won't be able to automate fully. And there will be points where I need to have some sort of supplement to assist with certain tasks that maybe I can't automate. So like for instance, voice. So dialing people. AI is pretty good right now, but the latency and the cost associated to having a high quality conversation over a long period of time isn't that great. And eventually it will be, probably in a year or 2 years, it probably will be quite good.
yeah,
But then there'll be another issue. So it's like, okay, like if that's solved, then like what's the next thing that's the bottleneck in the business that can't be automated? And if so, how much time do I want to put towards that? And what's the associated leverage to that task? So if it's a low leverage task and I shouldn't be spending time on it, and I know I could hire somebody else to do it well, then I'll probably supplement somebody to do that thing so I can then focus on other higher leverage tasks.
yeah. Got it. So, how do you have like a sort of rule of thumb or rubric or just um, a way for evaluating or prioritizing what you automate? Because it feels like there's this spectrum of things that can possibly be automated, and some things I think are obvious and what to automate, and then there's other things that are maybe less obvious, or that are it's obvious that you wouldn't automate those things because of the cost benefit. But what about that gray area where it's like, okay, well, I don't even know if it's worth my time automating. Like, how do you approach those things?
So usually it's time spent. So it's like if you do this task 5 times a week and you spend an hour per iteration of that task, so it's 5 hours a week, then that's probably a good one to consider automating. Because if you can get 5 hours a week back of your time, you can spend that 5 hours in something else. But if it's
Yeah,
something you do once a month for 30 minutes, maybe that's not worth it because of the time it would take to build that automation and then to automate that thing. So, and yeah, it depends. It would just depend on the scenario itself. So you would want to ask yourself, how much time am I spending towards this? Is it a significant portion of time where if I automated this, I would get X hours back?
yeah,
That's one time saving. But another one is generating sides. An example here of a thing I've automated for somebody else is it was a sign company. And the sign company basically had a bunch of, I forget what they called them. They're like night scouts or something like that, where they would basically drive around and take photos of these signs that were either broken or out or something like that. And they would have a database of photos of signs that were broken, and they would call or email each of the owners and say, hey, we fix signs, we do this, we noticed your sign was out, we'd be happy to assist, da, 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 da. And to do that, there was a bottleneck in their ability to send emails out to the owners because they had to do it manually. So we could automate both the research of the owner, customize the email with AI, and then search it in an infrastructure at scale. So that in itself is an automation that's not time saving, but generating. So it's like asking yourself, okay, if I could do 3x this or 5x this instead of doing, what I'm doing today, what does that mean for the business? So those are the two things that you would look at as like time saving, like how much time I'm saving, and also like how much revenue could I generate if I could double 3, 4, 5x this thing.
Awesome. And then in terms of like sort of stack or toolkit, for somebody that might be getting started, that is, maybe they don't have a technical background, but they have some technical inclination and curiosity. And what would be the stack that you would recommend in terms of automation, AI, whatnot?
Yeah. So somebody like you, so you would say somebody like completely starting out,
Yeah, somebody
fresh.
that's starting out. Yeah.
Okay. So in that case, I would just say the easiest thing is start chat with ChatGPT. So get a subscription, $20 a month, get GPT Plus. I would just supplement Google completely. No longer, and like, hey, Google, I love you. I have a lot of friends that work there, but I would say replace Google with ChatGPT and search everything there. If you have a question, search it. If you have an email to write it through there. If you have something you want to research that's more deep, like you have to write a report, use their deep research feature. So try to use ChatGPT as much as possible for anything that you have to do, like any task. And over time, you'll figure out what it's best suited for and what it's not best suited for. And once you figure out those nuances, after you've used it for probably 3 weeks consistently, you'll say, okay, like, I wonder if there are other tools out there that do this better. And then you can start asking that question, and you can supplement that tool for other tools. So it's like once you've used ChatGPT for a while, and you're like, all right, well, the way that it writes is pretty good, and I can improve its writing with good prompts and good context and things like that. But also, I wonder if there are better models for writing. And then you realize, okay, like, well, Claude Sonnet 4 is actually really good at writing, and I don't have to do too much for that. So maybe I use that for writing reports and emails. But then you have ChatGPT that generates images well. So it's like that could generate your images, but then Claude renders dashboards really well for presentations and charts. So it's like so it's like you learn all these nuances and all these different things through kind of just hands-on work. So the first thing is just get access to anything. So if it's GPT Plus or whatever, and then use it daily for every single task you can think of. And then over time, you'll start to see the cracks and the crevices inside of these tools, and you'll learn how to use them more effectively, but also you learn how to supplement them with other tools.
Yeah. And then in terms of like any automation platforms, what would you recommend as somebody starts to become more proficient with sort of the landscape of these different LLM platforms, and now they want to start automating maybe some of their own processes?
So this is an interesting question because I have an answer right now, but I think that answer will not be useful for in a year and a half or 2 years. So my default answer to this, like a non-technical person when they want to automate stuff, I say try Make or NAN, which are drag and drop tools where you can automate different things, and you can basically do it without code.
Yeah.
But as these models advance and as they get better, you can honestly get a lot of the automations you need through English. Just talk to the AI and say, hey, this is my process. This is what I do. These are the systems involved. I would like to create an automation for this. And it's likely going to spit out a script or some sort of application that'll assist you with that. Sure, it'll have bugs in the beginning and you'll have to work those out. But over time, these models will get so advanced that a lot of this drag and drop stuff will be more of a hindrance than a help. Because if I can just talk to AI and it builds what I need, then why would I go through the drag and drop and understanding all the features associated to these tools? So I would say for the next year and a half, 2 years, if you really want to automate something today and you're not technical, go with drag and drop. But if you want to kind of prepare for the future, that will be do vibe coding. So start out with ChatGPT to write some really simple scripts. So like if you want to automate or analyze some data, just ask it, say, here's a CSV from an Excel sheet, and I need to update these cells or create this thing. Can you help me? It'll either do it itself or it'll write you a Python script that you can then run yourself. And if you're like, I don't know how to run it, just ask AI, how do I run this? And it says, do this on your computer. And then you just do it. And really the answer is always AI. Like if you ever have a question, just AI every single time. Even like, how do I prompt? Like, how do I prompt this effectively? Ask the AI, how do I prompt me? Like prompt me effectively. Yeah. And you can just ask it and it'll write a prompt for you.
Yeah. There's sort of this iterative meta sort of thing going on with AI that I find fascinating. I think when people start to see that click, they're just like, whoa. I think one thing you kind of mentioned with Make and N8N that is interesting, it sort of begs this question of, things are moving so fast right now. And, it feels like it's sort of a moving target of sort of this bleeding edge. And, I'm going to spend X amount of time coming up with these drag and drop skills as an example. But, in a year, whatever, a year and a half, maybe, whatever skills I developed by investing this time might be obsolete. How do you think through that, right? It feels like it's a moving window. Like if I'm going to spend whatever 2 months learning XYZ skill, how does that factor into how do I prioritize what I spend my time learning? Because if I know that in 6 months, 8 months, whatever, 12 months, that skill that I learned, guess what? Now it's I don't need to know that skill anymore because it's obsolete.
Yeah.
Because there's an app or there's a platform or a layer that already handles that for me. How do you think through that?
Reactively. So it sounds silly, but oftentimes the question is like, why are you learning the skill in the first place? So are you learning it just to learn a skill? And historically, I would learn things just to learn them because it was just like fun and curious. But now I learn things because it's just in time learning. So this is how I discern the difference. Like I think it's what is it? There's like just because learning, just because it's interesting, and just because I think it will be useful in the future. And then there's just in time learning, which is I need to learn this thing because somebody asked me to create this automation, or somebody asked me to create this product, or somebody is like hiring for this position and I think that they might hire me if I know it. That's just in time. There's an activity you're trying to fulfill. And I found that just in time learning resonates way more, and you learn a lot more, a lot faster than just because. Because just because you're just like, oh, it's interesting. I'm gonna read this book about Abraham Lincoln because leadership is important. And it's like, that's useful, yeah. But if you're leading a team and you've just been given a manager role, or you want to get that manager role, and it's like a few months out, I need to learn this now because I need to know how to communicate. I need to know how to do this. So I'm going to consume as much leadership stuff as I can because it's happening now. And if I mess it up, I mess up big time. So it's like, it's the urgency forces the learning. So I'm very reactive in what I learn.
I love that. So what are the skills or the muscles that you would say sort of transcend, again, these moving target of technology? Like what are the skills that you're seeing emerge as, well, this could probably be a timeless skill or muscle?
It's going to sound crazy. It's actually something I was talking to one of my buddies about yesterday. He was asked a similar question. And I think one of the most timeless skills that anybody could have is attention. And how long can you focus on a task without getting distracted? Most people today are very easily distracted because of social media, because of just like there's notifications, there's emails, there's Slacks, there's Teams, there's all these things that are vying for your attention. And if you can't sit down and focus on a task for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours at a time, then you're very unlikely to progress anything meaningfully to whatever you're trying to build or whatever else. And the context of the conversation I was having with my friend is he was talking about books. We're like, oh man, yeah, like because I used to read a ton of books. Like I think it was like probably 8 years ago, I would do probably 4 books every 3 weeks. It was a ton. And recently I do maybe 1 a month now. And I was realizing that most of my book reading has been supplemented with AI summarizations and synthesis and reports. So I read AI reports, I read AI synthesis, I read AI summaries, but I don't read the book. And it's removing a muscle of attention. Because when you read a book and you read a book for 50 hours and you spend a lot of time with that topic and with that specific theme, it carves a different pathway in your brain, and it allows you to meditate on a specific topic for an extended period of time. So that not only teaches you something, but it changes your perspective on life, and it gives you a way to then act and behave in certain scenarios going forward. So being able to force yourself into those moments of attention, I think is going to be a very sought after skill, or something that would be very useful in the future, because most people will be like, oh, just ask AI to summarize the book for you, or oh, do that and this. And it's because it's easy. We humans, we want to preserve our energy. We're animals, right? In the end of the day. So we're biological. We want to make sure we're not wasting too much energy. We're going to do everything we can to do that with AI, social media, and everything else. So it's like, it's interesting, like the AI guys like saying like, don't use AI so much. But yeah, that's, I guess the moral of the story is attention probably is going to be the most important skill.
And it just seems like it's going to be scarce, right? Because everything in our world today incentivizes us for, like you said, to just be very quick, multitasking. Yeah, I was laughing earlier because there was a book I was thinking about getting, and I was like, oh, do I want to spend the $15 on the book? Let me just go to ChatGPT and have a conversation with it about the book, thinking that, I can glean more from that in a conversation. But to your point, and I think I can get, certain pieces of what I might be looking for in the short term. But to actually go and read the book is a completely different experience that, I would speculate, like you said, it probably does carve different pathways for neural connections in my own brain around what I'm learning. Yeah, that's I love that. That's just something that I wouldn't have thought. Are there any other skills that you think are valuable that came out of your conversation with your friend, perhaps?
So attention's one. I think another one would be writing. So often, like writing is basically no longer nobody has to write anymore. Basically,
Yeah,
that's the conclusion. I can use dictation. I can say, hey, here's something I want to do, and this is something I want to write, and da 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 da, and the AI writes it
yeah,
for you. Or hey, I need to write this report. Do it for me. And that skill, being able to articulate your thoughts in a succinct and well thought out way, is not critical for writing's sake, but it's for communication's sake. So if I'm having a talk with you right now, or if I'm doing a presentation, or if I'm doing a pitch, or if I'm trying to find a wife or a husband, I need to be able to articulate my thoughts, tell stories, do things like that. And one of the things I found most useful when it came to communication is writing. I would sit down, I would write a blog or a newsletter and convey my ideas in the written word, which forced me to externalize the implicit thoughts I had. And to make explicit what's implicit forces you to structure it in a way that makes sense so the other person
yeah.
understands. But if you just keep it in your head and you never write anything and you never think through the idea yourself, then everything is either amorphous or not well thought through, both of which are not great.
Yeah, and I think in one of your blog articles you referenced Jordan Peterson, who said that like writing, I'm butchering this, but writing is basically akin to thinking, right? You can't really write without thinking, and the more you write, the more deeply you write, the more deeply you're thinking. And if nobody's writing anymore, are they really thinking? And how deep are they thinking if they're not able to articulate that, at least on in their heads or getting that on paper?
Yeah.
You know?
What's funny is I bet you didn't think this, people listening, that the AI guy is telling you both to write more because AI can do that for you and to read more because AI can do that for you. So there you go.
Here's the thing, right? Like, I think a lot of people won't be doing it anymore, or there's be fewer people that are writing, fewer people that are doing deep work, and reading books, right? And yeah, it feels like, and I still maybe there's more of a case that needs to be made about what are the tangible benefits of doing some of these things, but it's just by nature, I think, like you said, people want to conserve energy and
Yeah.
they'll look for shortcuts. And to read a book and spend, whatever, 20 hours reading a book versus going to ChatGPT and spending 20 or 30 minutes thinking that you got everything out of the book that you need, right? Those are two different, very different, completely different experiences. So
And there's one important thing I want to point out here because I don't want people to take away from this conversation that I shouldn't use AI and I should write and read myself. You should use AI to write and read for like 90% of the things you have to do because that's just it's faster, it's more effective. It likely could write better than you can. It synthesize ideas better than you can. So you should use it for those purposes. But you should carve out 5 to 10% of your time to then focus on building those skills yourself so you can then use them for things outside of AI applications, such as conversations, presentation, thinking, attention, etc. So it's important to take away from this, like heavily use AI, become an expert in the area of knowing how to use this for your job or your position or whatever else, and then build skills that are going to be likely more beneficial long term.
now, is this something that you just realized on your own? Because it feels like the typical person would just sort of fall into that flow of like, okay, I don't really have to write anymore. Was this a conscious decision on your part where you realized just the power of writing, thinking, deep work, focus? Like, how did you develop awareness of these principles and make a conscious decision to be like, you know what, I'm conscious, I'm not going to be lazy. I'm going to spend whatever 15% of my time, 20% of my time actually thinking and writing. Like, was that a conscious decision or?
Yeah, I mean everything I'm telling you here is things that I've messed up myself. So like none of this is like all these are mistakes I've made. So I think I'm just ahead of everybody else because I've experienced this for so long. So beforehand, like before AI, I did a lot of writing and reading. That was kind of one of my favorite things to do, and I benefited from that task. But then as soon as AI came around and I adopted it really early with ChatGPT-3 and GPT-3 and I started utilizing it to automate other things and also myself, I fell out of that practice. And it was probably a year and a half where I was just basically had everything written and read by AI. And then I realized after doing that for a year or so, I'm like, whoa, both my attention has shrunk. And also I feel like when I articulate myself, it's like a blob of just like random stuff that comes out that doesn't make sense. And I just realized there was a decay in my ability to both focus and articulate myself. And then when that happened, I was like, okay, well, there's one variable that changed,
Yeah.
and that's the fact that AI has basically consumed my life. So if that's the case, then I need to articulate and I need to both figure out why it's happening, which is the thing I've mentioned to you. And then also I need to figure out a way to create a routine of sustaining and maintaining that skill set that can easily disappear in a world that allows it to do so.
Yeah, It's so gosh, it's so interesting, like, just how fast things are moving and how the technology is changing the culture, and the culture's, it's changing the technology. It's just really strange times right now. Sort of shifting gears here a little bit over the next few minutes. What's sort of next for you as you, I get well, let me rephrase this. As you think about the future, let's say over the next 12 months, what are you most excited about in terms of just the developments of the ecosystem, the technologies, adoption? What are you most excited about? And the following question, what are you most, maybe it's the same side. What are you most worried about?
It's probably the same answer.
Yeah.
I would probably say I mean, the obvious answer is AI and what we'll be able to do with AI as it advances. I'm excited to see what GPT-5 looks like. I'm excited to see what, Gemini 3 looks like, and Claude 5, and all these different models that advance. And more interestingly, the agentic nature of these models. And I know a lot of people talk about agents because it's a sexy word. I'm interested in the ability to do more complex tasks with these AI without any human intervention. That's what I'm excited about, is sending off an AI to do a task and have it come back to me in 3 hours and say it's done without any errors, without any issues. It's just finished. And then being able to scale that up and have 100 of them doing 100 different things. I then come back and maybe there's only 5 errors out of 100, and I can just fix those 5. And I then was able to get done what would have taken me 6 months in 5 days. That's what I'm excited about. And
How far out do you think we are from what you just described? Is that 6 months, 12 months,
well,
24?
right now with coding, I most of the development that I and a lot of people I know do, they're getting what would take them months they can get done in days. So right now I can build an application, like a properly sized production enterprise application that's deployed and scalable. And depending on the complexity of the application, maybe a week. In the past, that would have taken me and 6 other people 6 months to a year. So we're seeing glimmers of this in different parts of work life, where you can see it's happening mostly in code right now because code is measurable and there's an objective answer of correct. So with
Yeah.
AI, it's very good at figuring out how to do something when it can test itself and there's a correct answer. But the question is, how do we then get out of that and we start applying this to sales calls or to content creation that converts or to whatever else? And like these areas that are more amorphous and there's not like a clear 2 + 2 = 4. That's what I'm excited about seeing, of like, how can we expand out into those areas and both figure out measurements of what success looks like and then scale that up with AI. Um, yeah. So I think that's both exciting and not exciting. It's scary because the scary part is like, as soon as that happens, there's probably going to be a delay because I don't know. I think it's like Orwell or some other person, some sci-fi author that said the future is here, just not equally distributed. And that's
Mhm.
exactly what's happening now, where like a lot of people haven't even adopted ChatGPT, which is crazy to me because there's a report that was put out by I forgot, Mary Meeker, Carrie Meeker.
Mhm.
Meeker. She puts out these reports, and one of them showed a adoption for ChatGPT because it's the most used AI. And I
Yeah.
think it was like 37% or maybe 28% of people in the entire world have ever used ChatGPT at least once. And like
Yeah.
a lot of people be like, "Oh, that's big," but for me, that's like 70-ish% of people have never touched ChatGPT or any other form of AI.
I mean,
And what
that's
is it? Yeah. And so, what
yeah, I
does
mean,
that look like in the future?
if you have access to computer or phone, by now you should have touched it at least, right?
Right. And if that's
Yeah.
true, then play that out for this point that I've just made, where in the future there will be tools where if you know how to use them effectively, you can autonomously run 100 different things simultaneously, have them come back to you 3 hours later and have that job be done. And
Yeah.
maybe that's only 20% of society that does that. And what does that mean for the division? If I can do myself as much as another company can do with 100 people and it takes them much
Yeah.
longer, then what does that mean? Like I can sell the thing they're selling for $5 and they sell it for 500,000.
Yeah. Yeah. So very quickly, I think there's going to be a portion of society that's going to a portion of society is going to accelerate very fast. I think about like getting sucked into a black hole, right? And it's going to get stretched. The folks that
String
are
of fire.
laggards, there's going to be an increasing gap between the folks that have not adopted and an acceleration of the folks that are sort of the 10%, 20%, whatever that have adopted. And what does a world like that look like? I don't know. It just
Yeah,
and how
and that's
fast is that
that's
going to come?
yeah, and that's my fear is like there's very minimal infrastructure right now today for that. Like
Yeah.
there's no form of UBI, there's no form of like whatever. So like if most stuff does get automated away and AI can do most things, and actually that might be my biggest fear. It's like where do you get meaning? Because most people get
Yeah.
their meaning from being useful. And if you no longer are useful because everything is automated both physically and digitally, then where do you derive meaning from?
And if it just becomes like pleasure seeking, I mean, how much meaning can you get from that? Right? I don't know.
Yeah, it's got very deep very fast. Welcome to the philosophy corner.
It's yeah. I mean, from going from like technical applications, which yeah, it's a big part of it right now, but like it's gonna just have far-reaching implications as far as like what it means to be human, what is our purpose and meaning. Are we just these bootloaders that are giving birth to this new form of life, which is AI, and soon to be robots, right? That are manipulating things physically like any human would.
Yeah,
It's
this is also kind of like out there, but we often talk about evolution as if it stopped. Like we are at the stop point of evolution. Evolution is paused, but people don't realize that evolution is always ongoing.
yeah,
So we've evolved to this point of humanity, but as it continues, it will continue, and like whatever the future version of humanity is, will be that.
yeah. But the
So
thing
like
is, the biological, like our biology's evolved over tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands and millions of years. But this thing that we're giving birth to is evolving orders of magnitudes faster, far faster than we can evolve as humans. I mean, our culture can evolve relatively quickly, but our biology, I don't know. I don't know that it
right,
can evolve that quickly.
that's the whole premise of Neuralink, right? So Elon Musk's company
Right.
of like basically putting a brain chip in your head is trying to accelerate that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. All right, Dylan. I would love to continue the conversation. Maybe we hold that up for another podcast episode because there's so many things that we can go down as far as just the philosophical, cultural, biological, implications, and it's fascinating. It really is like, in truth, is stranger than fiction. I think it's becoming like that, And anyway, thank you for the work that you do in terms of helping to bring AI to the forefront of of what people should be thinking about and trying to get their arms around. And I've learned so much from you just here in this quick conversation, and I'm sure our audience will learn a lot as well. I'm eager to get this out there and to reflect upon our conversation and some of the things that you have mentioned. I mean, the attention to focus and deep work is something that I've been a little bit lazy about, and I think I'm in good company. But I think there is a case to be made for reading books once again, and developing that muscle in terms of attention and focus. Where can folks connect with you? I want to put this in the show notes to make sure that we are
Yeah,
giving folks, we're giving folks a glimpse of who Dylan Davis is. But I think
yeah.
there's a lot that folks can benefit from as they get to know you better.
Yeah, so I have a YouTube. I rant at my camera twice a week. So if you want to come and listen to me talk about AI, I do that. Also on LinkedIn, I post quite often, every single day almost. And also I have a free AI Insights series that I mentioned. So if you're interested, there's a free newsletter that you can sign up for. You get 30 days of AI insights of how you can leverage AI more effectively, both within your own job and also how to automate certain parts of your business. So if that's interesting, then you'll have the link there too.
All right. Awesome, Dylan. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone.
All right.